All right, today we're going to talk about how we can find out and how much we can find out and what it takes to get there. So first we have to decide how much do we want to find out. So let's say in this case, I want to find out at a level of 7. Okay, so I find that level on my graph and I come horizontally to my gradient line. Where it intersects with my gradient line, I'm going to come straight down to where it intersects with my fuck around line. That there is going to tell me how much I have to fuck around to find out what I need to find out. See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out. And also, if you stay down here and you never fuck around, you'll never find out. So I hope this lesson is helpful. Thank you.
I don't know why we didn't even do an episode after that. I think that kind of covered everything that we need to know in life. But since this is a show, we'll go ahead and just kick it off. And what is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Flow State, the show where we take all things Webflow and design seriously and not much else. As always, we have a banger of an episode for you, brought to you your Huck Finch boys, Hein and Matt. And it's a banger because we have a badass brand strategist, writer, and content designer, Kendra Rainey of Edgar Allan, on the show. She's going to talk to us about content design, what it is, how adopting it can help us make the web a better, more accessible, and more delightful place. It's worth fucking around and finding out, in my honest opinion. But before we jump in, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for future shows, and make sure you never ever miss out on the most fun you could possibly have talking design, Webflow, and no-code dev. So let's go ahead and start the show.
Yeah, first of all, Kendra, thanks so much for taking some time out with us. Before we jump right into our craziness, just wanted to get a little bit of background on yourself, Edgar Allan, maybe how you started there, how you sort of found your way into this kind of role, as it's something that every studio probably should have, but maybe doesn't. So that's kind of an interesting place there. And most importantly, your thoughts on the cold open, sort of a life operating system of a cold open.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm Kendra Rainey. I'm a writer, a brand strategist, and a Midwestern girl. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, but I've lived in Atlanta for a while now, and that's where I am now. And I am the VP of strategy and content at a place called Edgar Allan. We are a brand to build Webflow enterprise agency. And we are actually winner of Webflow Agency of the Year 2022 and 2023, which was very exciting both times. Awesome. And we also create products. We have a couple of Webflow connected products, Wes, which is for enterprise staging, and Matt, which is for migration, and Slater, which is a no-code AI tool for learning JavaScript and injecting it into Webflow sites. So we do a bunch of stuff. We are Edgar Allan. We're fully remote, 40-ish folks, 15 including leadership in Atlanta, mostly in Atlanta. 10 or so designers and PMs and devs in Argentina and Buenos Aires, another 10 or so devs and designers in Belgrade, Serbia, a handful of content folks and other people that do various things in Johannesburg and Pretoria, South Africa. So we are kind of all over the place. And our whole thing is we believe in building a story-first or story-driven web, one kind of where marketing organizations and client teams, big and small, can kind of own and scale their story really easily using solid brand and audience and content always thinking and sort of Webflow plus, which is like other injections like AI and custom code and fun stuff like that. And I got into this business. I was a high school English teacher and for a very brief time in Indiana, and did not enjoy that. I was asked one day by the guy I was seeing, he's like, "Hey, you want to move to Atlanta?" I was like, I got nothing else going on. So
no follow-up questions? You're like,
no, I was like, nope, where's the U-Haul? You know? So we came here, and I've been here ever since, and actually Google. This is my fuck around and find out story. By the way, I'm a Gen Xer, so I am part of Generation Fuck Around and Find Out. so that graph represents my decision making life processes more than I care to admit. But
That's awesome.
I actually Googled copywriting or whatever it was back then. Wasn't Google, and was like, I wonder how I can get into this. Somebody on like a Taco Bell commercial had said copywriter. I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. What is that? And so I Googled that in school, and there was a school in Atlanta called Portfolio Center. They're now called Miami Ad School, and I went. And showed up sight unseen. I was like, "Hey guys, hello," and that turned out to be like what I'm good at. So that's how I got here.
Shout out to the Taco Bell, like potentially being the the catalyst for
the
this.
Genesis of a whole
the
career
catalyst for a lot of things, but very rarely
Yes.
a career switch.
Alexander Graham Bell gets too much credit. Taco Bell is right up there with him.
Yeah.
That's right. And also shout out to Slater app. I've been fucking around and finding out with that the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's really cool having done the other alternative, which is quite a few different parts and pieces. So really, really cool. Highly recommend if you're doing some more complicated dev things along with Webflow. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, first, and also congratulations for that back-to-back championship rings of winning like enterprise, like with like Webflow, like year in and year out. So you guys are gonna go and have like that Boston Celtics like streak, I think.
Yeah. Hope so. Fingers crossed.
The early Boston Celtics. Yeah.
So, jumping into things, we were talking about content design. We really liked the idea that you were talking about how you're trying to help your clients like own and scale their story and their brand. Can we jump in by just kind of explaining what content design is and why, at least in your opinion, it's the right approach for creative agencies?
Yeah, sure. So in its purest sense, content design is just the process and philosophy of treating content as an element of design instead of an afterthought, instead of a thing that's like, yeah, there's design and there's UX in digital, experiences. There's design, there's UX, and there's development, and then there's content. That's what the kind of like the flow goes. It uses data and evidence to give an audience what it needs at the time that they need it, in a way that's expected and useful. So, and that I didn't make up. That is from a great book called Content Design by Content Design London that came out a few years ago. And we interpret it a little bit differently at Edgar Allan. I'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a minute. But I think it's a great approach for any digital agency or anybody making a digital experience to have, because for one, content, and I feel like I don't just say this as a person who's spent their entire career in content, but it's often devalued as a part of the digital experience creation process, glossed over, I guess maybe is one of the best way to put it. It's underappreciated how difficult and time consuming it is to do it right. And it's often sort of left to the end of the process. And I spent a lot of time pre-Webflow kind of working in content as a person who focused on digital content and digital brands and brand strategy for digital entities usually, and felt very locked out of the process and locked out of the room. I was like somewhere along the line, a designer would say, hey, you got 30 characters to fill here. Can you put something here? I'm like, that is not a great way to do anything. So having that mindset puts audience in the driver's seat. And that's why it's a good idea. It helps you create for a person the right thing in the way that they expect it. Otherwise, websites are just objects made to solve problems, right? For a user, for a company. And so you get the opportunity to know what they need and solve that problem for them. Also, without content, websites are just sort of shelves to sit stuff on. Like it's a framework. So it deserves a little more attention. And we also think of it at Edgar Allan as like a link between brand and execution.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I think anybody who's been in the creative space can definitely understand how frustrating it is when the content does fall to the wayside. And editing as designers, I think we saw like Nathan from Webflow like shared this the other day, and you liked it. He was basically saying it's like filming a movie without a script, and it's what it feels like all the time. I think we've all kind of been there.
And you can do that, but you better be prepared to be surprised.
Right.
by the output.
Yeah, there are very few people who can pull that off. Like Wong Kar-wai can pull that off, but not every filmmaker can pull that off. And then you have to go back and edit everything together. So you can't really do that the same way with a website where you're just going to go and create all this stuff and then like, all right, time to I'm gonna do more. I'm gonna do like 100 miles of film, and then maybe there's usable film in there for us to make a movie out of it.
Right, not very efficient.
Yeah, not very efficient.
Good editing required there. And like in our world, like that editing usually happens like if this doesn't go well, like during the development process, which is amazingly much easier these days, especially with tools like Webflow or whatever to do that. But it's like in a way that's sometimes a like curse. I feel like whereas we're like we can go so fast and do all these things, so everyone it's like in a way it takes like pressure off the content that probably shouldn't be taken off the content,
Sure.
at least in parts of the process. So
Yeah, I definitely feel that sometimes too, but it's worth slowing down and setting a good foundation, which is another, like my other soapbox is brand strategy. Have one. I mean,
yeah, just like your whole just like probably do it. So yeah, I think this maybe leads into like one of the follow-up questions. When did Edgar Allan start with a content-driven thing in mind? The name sort of sounds Edgar Allan, sort of like says like, well, this was probably in the DNA from the beginning, but perhaps talking about that and maybe how it's evolved, I assume, as you all have learned with this, even just for you personally as well.
Yeah, so we started, this is our 10th anniversary, so we started in 2013.
Congrats.
And thank you. And our founder and managing partner, his name is Mason Poe, so he chose the Edgar Allan moniker. And also EdgarAllan.com was available for purchase at that point. Amazing. So I know, right? Serendipitous. So we started the agency, and I was employee number, I guess, not counting him too. So we had a front-end developer who had joined him very early on, and then I was there about a month later. And he approached me with this idea of like, I want to start an agency around story. And I think it's one of the things that's sort of missing in digital executions and in the way that we create things. I want to, story is the most fundamental way that we come to know the world. It's sort of a very human thing. And what I want to do is like connect humans to other humans via digital machinations, right? Or by digital objects. I was like, that sounds amazing because heck, that's what I do. So I'm a storyteller essentially, and everybody's a storyteller, whatever. We talk about having better than storytelling, like have a story with your clients, have a story with your audience, have a story within your agency, in a culture. But so we started there, and I didn't really know anything about content design specifically, or even have that idea then. I did read that book that I mentioned somewhere around 2019 or so, and I was like, whoa, this is great, right? So it's a perspective that's really refreshing. It felt sort of like a missing piece for me. And they talk about content design a lot in terms of the idea came out of creating very heavy, actually UK.gov was what they were working on, the people that wrote this book, creating a very heavy institutional kind of lowest common denominator needs to be very informative site for a large swath of people with a lot of experiences. And so they realized, God, we're just doing a crap job at this. Most government agencies do. Let's think of a different way to organize information and to be audience first. And so content design. So I also think of it as, we have evolved after that initial sort of light bulb moment about, oh, this is great. This can help our process move a lot smoother. We also discovered Webflow real early, so we've been using it for about 8 or 9 years, I guess. And so we were like one of the very first kind of early adopters. And the flexibility and the ability for non-technical folks to actually get in the program and do stuff was insane. I was like, when I first wrote my first headline in a Webflow site, I was like, this is going to change my world because I can see what I'm like. I can see the whole thing. I can collaborate with the designer. We can do it all at the same time. So that pairing that with that content design mindset, it just basically gave us the tools and the mentality to start to be more collaborative across all of our functions, right? So UX folks can work with writers, can work with strategists, can work with designers, can work with devs, and everybody can be sort of, our design director says, everybody in the pool, and doing all this stuff at the same time. And it just really leverages a lot of good thinking at the same time. And I just needed to see the brand work that I was doing reflected more directly in a final product, rather than being like somebody says, here you go, and then walks away, after doing all that great work. Because brand work involves audience and competitive review and sort of figuring out like the DNA of a problem. And then you just like, here, and then you say, see ya, and then you see the finished product, you're like, what happened? Where'd all that go? So it gave us the tools to and the mindset to collaborate better, and that's where we ended up here. So we've sort of settled on that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think like when I think about it a little bit more about the whole kind of like process of designing a website, from just the idea of it, what you're saying is like so true that like, with even UX design and designing a website, like you can design it from a, good design standpoint and doing it for accessibility and all that. But
Yes.
that doesn't necessarily mean it has the audience in mind at all. It's when you bring in the content part where you're looking at the story and like who's talking to, where you can actually have this full recipe for exactly the ingredient to make a really great dish. And I think that it's lost so much on people, like how important that is. And like you said earlier, it feels like such an afterthought that you can just whip it up because everybody can put pen to paper, I guess.
Right. Or type, or yeah, exactly. It's so accessible. I think everybody thinks, oh, I can do that, or I should do that. And maybe you can, but I would say I would almost always advocate for at least having one expert in the room to help.
Another hot take. You heard it here first. People who know stuff really are helpful. But I think something that struck me, I think you said it when we heard you at Webflow conference, and you said it again, is about content design is like you can have a great story and all of these things, but there's like one little tidbit that always stands out to me, which is like when you expect it, like you have what you need when you expect it to. And a lot of times users like they can't directly tell you like I expect on a website like for X to happen when I cross the Y portion. Like that part is what's hard, and I think takes a lot of expertise. And a lot of times like templates are like generically solving for that, and all these things that are like more accessible, like writing is, everyone can write, but everyone is not necessarily good at it or for the specific purpose. And I think kind of the point a moment ago, it's like design is even becoming a lot more accessible to where it's like you could do it, and that's great, but
you can make a website in Canva. You can ask Midjourney to make you some wireframes, whatever you want to ask, I'm sure there's an actual AI tool for that, but I'm not coming to mind.
I think there's this part of it where like all these tools become accessible, and like Matt Hansen is like, I make my like perfect website for me, and it's like, but who's that like really for? You know what I mean?
Who is that? Yeah.
You're like, man, I'm just like staring at it. I'm like, this has no functional purpose in the world outside of my brain. But good job, I guess. Even if it looks beautiful or whatever. So audience of one.
Yeah. I always like using food as a thing because I don't think about very much other than food. But it's kind of like a lot of things are very accessible in food space as well. Really, you can get the recipes for like. Thomas Keller's like stuff from the French Laundry. It's there.
Right.
You can use everything that he uses in his kitchen, but you're probably not going to be able to reproduce that thing because there's a lot more skill and craftsmanship that he has honed over the 30, 40 years that he's worked in kitchens and washing dishes that allows him to be able to do what he does well. And I think that part is like getting people to understand that. And I think that goes well into the kind of our next question was, while obviously you can tell that Matt and I are totally bought into this and we believe in this like wholeheartedly. You may encounter clients or prospects who are skeptical or unfamiliar with it. How do you go about kind of explaining it to them to get them to understand the effectiveness of it and to essentially buy in, which is really, really key and important?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on a lot of pitch calls. I pitch a lot with our business lead, and I think it's a lot of times because people, want to hear about how we're going to elevate their story, or how are we going to create that kind of like foundation for them. But we talk to a lot with our prospects about starting with story, and story lives in that narrative, so it's sort of an easier concept to grasp if we kind of go in that way. And on pitches, I'll often start sort of at brand, and it's getting easier to sell the importance of starting with research and position and story, thankfully, than it used to be. People seem to get that idea a little bit more, and then kind of get a sense of where the client's brand is. So like goes from like literally non-existent or to partly formed to like really well defined. And then we kind of go in that way, talking about making sure that those audiences that they're really wanting to reach, that we're that we're reaching them, that we're ensuring that all the work around story and audience need and messaging and competitive analysis and all that stuff that happens in brand is carried through to the external digital experience. And if they haven't done any brand at that point, that's compelling for one reason, right? So they want to have that foundation. Like, yeah, that's one of those things that's been missing. If they have spent money on getting a brand done, it's real compelling. And they're like, hey, we're going to make sure that all that money you spent with whatever that other agency was, or all that time you spent internally we're going to make sure we're going to like hold that hand of that experience and really honor your audiences, maybe do even some more research on that, and create an experience at the end that's going to meet your goals, meet their goals at the same time.
Yeah, I love the, it's like leveraging the work that you've already done. We talk about that a little bit sometimes as well, which is like, sometimes it's not designed. Like, you all are larger and doing more enterprise,
Correct.
probably size projects. So they probably have already spent money on it.
You would not believe. Yes, lots of them, yes.
Unfortunately, yeah. Most people wouldn't, but yeah. I only say that to mean like they've probably done an effort, or at least talked about it in a lot of meetings, even if they haven't.
Correct. They have some idea of what ballpark they're living in. Yeah.
And it's probably been pushed off, like to your point, for years, and they never really actually did it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's interesting to think about just leveraging the work that they've already done, and sometimes we'll even talk about like, even if it's just a great product at that point. It's like, you've put all this into this thing, like literal blood, sweat, and tears in startup worlds very often. In any business, really, is very hard to start. So like, why don't we have something that accompanies it that's somewhere in the ballpark of that kind of passion and effort?
Why stop now? I mean, you're like inches from the finish line if that's where you started. If you started back at zero. So, and also the web is impermanent. If we don't hit it, especially with a tool like Webflow, changeable, eminently changeable. Test, repeat, iterate. So
yeah, and getting back into a little bit of the collaboration stuff. It's always been a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, right? Like, which comes first, the design or the content? I think pretty firmly we've planted the flag of the three of us and how we think it should work. But how does that push and pull work? You've mentioned how Webflow kind of helps everybody is in the pool together now, whereas before it was like a much more linear type of thing.
Yeah.
But what advice would you have for sort of maintaining the sort of harmonious relationship between these different things? There's dev in there as well. Designers and dev famously are not friends in the like sort of antiquated version of these processes. But now we're talking about a third party that's at least as important. Maybe how does everyone look when they're all in the pool together? Maybe a way to phrase it.
That's a great question. I think for us, we've made it part of our culture. And it's, the culture I will say, just to like pat all of us on the back, the culture at Edgar Allan is the healthiest of any company that I've ever worked at. I've literally looked at places where people were in competition with each other to get their work produced, and that just makes them hate each other and hate the client and hate you. We just like to acknowledge that everybody on the team has something to contribute to all the parts of the experience, right? So there's no gatekeeping. So if you're a UX person and you've got a great headline idea, my best story on that is we were working on Holiday Inn Express's website a few years ago, and our UX guy, he was like, hey, I'm just, I really feel strongly about this. This is just a silly headline, but it looks like it's going to be really good here, and it's within their brand stock, and it said like pancakes coming in hot or something. Like something about breakfast. It made it to the site and it stayed there for a good 6 years. I was like, that is so good. You want to do this sometimes? Because this is great. But, if you're a writer and you think like a color choice in the headline isn't right, you've got the floor. You've got, and everybody is availed of the sort of the user research, the brand. They can argue their point. That they all have, we just want to say, like, everybody here is an expert. We've all got valuable experience and insight to add to this, and we're really open and respectful about it. That everything in the pool thing happens probably less less in Webflow, in terms of like, we'll edit in writers will edit in the CMS, we'll write headlines in the editor. The editing capabilities are probably about to get a whole lot better and a whole lot more robust in Webflow, which excites the hell out of me because I would love to be in there and doing that stuff. We work a lot in Figma though. So we are just all in there together and we're making notes and we're going back and forth and we're having little Figma chats. And since we're all remote, we're not sitting in a room and doing that. And to be honest with you, I did it in a room with other people for a long time, and it was that felt one way, but even doing this like remotely and collaboratively in a tool, it even feels like better to me. Like you can get a lot done and you can, hop on a phone call and do a brainstorm and move things around in real time. And then it's like, boom, it's there. Yeah. So that's what we do anyway.
Yeah. Eat hot pancakes without bothering other people and getting people hungry.
Yeah. Exactly. You can.
It reminds me of like, there's this great thing, I'm going to butcher the story, but the gist of it is like from Parks and Recreation, the show, and it was sort of like a lot of improvisers and comedians, and Chris Pratt was on that show and was like not an improviser or comedian, and like the head writer of the show said like he has the best line in the history of the show, and everyone was so mad about it, like all the comedians and all the like writers. It was something like they were looking up like what's wrong with me on WebMD. He's like, I put in like, all my symptoms and it came up and said I have a web connectivity error or something. Like he just improv that, and like you'll see that there's like
That's
a big
awesome.
round table that they did, and he's just like, to this day, the fact that Pratt got like my favorite line,
the best
of
line,
the show is like so frustrating. But it shows like obviously they had created an atmosphere there where like the non-pure improviser guy felt like he could go for it in that moment because it was part of the spirit of the show, and he got the winning thing per the comedy writers. So that pancake line reminded me of that. It's just like, hey, I'm just like a web dev, but like I really feel like this would work well.
Well, I think for this next question, I think first of all, the success metric that I think really matters at the end of the day is that culture that you talked about. And I think we could dive into that as a whole thing as an entirely different episode because that's just so important and key. But that's obviously probably the most important success measure is that you can build a culture around this approach. But more on specifically for the clients, like how do you measure the success of this content-driven approach? And neither Matt nor I are big KPI and metrics guys, but I think the customers want to know stuff like this, right? The effectiveness and impact. So how do you guys go about showing this to them?
Yeah, so it's kind of different every project a little bit. We tend to focus most on meeting the specific goals and needs that the client or business has first. So we also try, we work to capture specific metrics like time on site and signups and conversions and increased traffic and things like that, and try to compare before and after. And those things are like really obvious, kind of like, one-to-one quantitative. I guess we do a little quantitative and a little qualitative. And so on the qualitative end, sometimes the measure is something around the problem they came to help us solve. So like, okay, we're here, we need, we're launching a new product. Okay, so can we help you make sure that is successful? What are the metrics that are attached to that? Can we measure that? We just got funded and we need to look legit and start attracting talent. Okay, so the metrics around success there would be like, how many new roles did you post? How many people, did you hire from that? How many great people? And my favorite one, which is one that Mason actually talked about with our client on stage at Webflow Conf New York, was his was, I was going to get fired if I don't get this site launched by by this certain day.
And those kind of goals are very real, like not the like, let's get our clicks up.
Yeah. And so that is, a real goal to meet. And if we meet that, then at the very least, that client is very, very happy at that point. Yeah. So ultimately, we just want to give whatever the audience for the site is what they need in the way they want to consume it. And the product and business success is kind of a great measure of that, right? So, but it's not the only thing, obviously. It's just, it's a little hard. And we struggle with this in like, creating case studies. It's like, how can we show effectiveness? And I think sometimes it's, SEO and time on site. And sometimes it's, we had this massive problem. We're like one of our clients right now, NCR, is splitting into two companies. And they had an FCC regulated date that they had to like close down one thing and start up another. And it was like, all right, it was real fast, but we did it. So it just, one of them just launched. So that was like, okay, success. That's a success metric.
Yeah, the not getting fired thing, being that we're both from the Midwest, it made me immediately think of like Iowa's OC needing to score an average of 25 points a game or something like that to keep his job.
Well, if your dad is your boss, there's some extra leeway there that maybe some of us don't have in our roles. But so I'll do the Debbie Downer, closest to the Debbie Downer question that we have. We've talked about like why this approach we all think is the best sort of way to approach just as it pertains especially to digital experiences and websites. But we'd be remiss to not ask, like, what are some of the barriers that this type of approach might stand up, even if there's sort of, sometimes there's like false hurdles, right? It's like one of which is like, well, we actually have to write the content first. Like these like very real things, like if we just skip it, it'll seem like we're going way faster.
Right.
We all know we're not, but there's this like momentum thing that can happen. So are there any approaches or tweaks to it to like what barriers come up as you pitch this? People get inside it, and unfortunately I don't think it's the norm. So, what are you usually up against? They've agreed to it, it's in the budget, all of these like common kinds of things. After that, like in the midst of the project, are there any kind of pieces that you've learned there, or
Yeah, well, for one, we definitely, I don't know if this is what you reply, we definitely don't write like every word of a site before we design anything. It's kind of as I said, like content always, so things are going on at the same time, sort of in tandem and lockstep. But one, from an agency side, an objection might be just not having content folks on staff or available, or honestly not having the right people for the job. There's a lot of writers out there, even ones that write for the web, that have sort of like bad process and siloed ways of working sort of ingrained, or they're just not adept at making the jump to like, you got to have a little bit of a technical mind to understand the world of a website, the back end of a website, the way that it's structured. You have to think. I wonder if like, and I know this is something that's going to be moving forward, but I wonder like my generation, we had those choose your own adventure novels. And I think of a website as like a choose your own adventure sometimes. Like you can, there's like 17 ways to die 3 pages in. But there are ways that you're going to like, there's 17 ways to get to this amazing end too. Right. Another one might be just like not having the mindset or the willingness or the ability or just remembering to bring the content designer in on day one. So just late to the table is just kind of a big kind of challenge here. It's easy to say, okay, we're ramping up. I talked about this in my Webflow speech too. I think that the web is often designed thing first instead of idea first. Yeah. So client comes and says, I need a website. And we say, okay, that's going to have some wireframes. And it's going to have a homepage. And it's going to have like some structure, and we're going to put these things in drawers, and it's going to be easy. Well, rather than, let's back up and say, why are we doing this? Who is this for? What's it for? How are we going to get it done? And set that table, I guess, first, to make another food metaphor. And then the third way is just like, even if the budget for like, yes, we're going to write all the copy, we're going to have all these people collaborating, which actually takes time, and so that's money. Not fighting for research is a pitfall. To say like, okay, so we can't just rely on, I am not the audience for this website. I'm very rarely the audience for any website I'm building. So I have to have outside input, which requires research. And it doesn't mean before this job, I worked for I would call a big iron brand agency. So we would take like 12 months to do a brand. And then even longer to do a website. We can't move that slowly. We don't want to move that slowly where I am now. So you can just do a little research. Just like ask a few really good questions. Have a couple of one-on-one 15-minute calls with either your subject matter expert inside the client's organization, or with a couple of really trusted customers. Or if you can't get those people, customer service agents and salespeople are fantastic to talk to like pick brains up, to like say, hey, what are the biggest problems? You're out there selling this shit all the time. Yeah. What are the things that, you're asked the most? What are the things that people seem to have the most problem with? What can we help them understand in this experience or do faster and better? So just a little bit of research, a little bit of workshop, a little bit of, just goes a long way. And I would say fighting for that is not fighting for that is a pitfall that often happens.
That's great. Yeah, nobody gets more rejections than the salespeople. So they feel that sting or those objections, the sting of those objections more probably uniquely than anyone else.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to say that this is ultimately for the audience and just keeping them in the dark the entire time through all this, not giving them a seat at the table. We appreciate the time so far, and we would talk to you forever, but I think it's time for us to jump into our next segment, which is the nugs of wisdom. You've been dropping them all day, all morning with us, but there's probably some things that we've been missing and skipped out on due to our poor interviewing skills and desire to talk about food and random things. So, firstly, I want to ask, like as I said, you've been dropping nugs like they're hot, but we want to spice them up a little bit. Can you share some tips for how maybe creative studios looking to adopt this client-driven approach, maybe to how they can adopt it into their work? What are some maybe best practices or initial steps you would recommend?
Yeah, it's going to be maybe like a hit list of some of the stuff that I've already talked about. So first, build in time and budget to get started right. Content discovery on a big or small scale is the way that we would start nearly every project. And that's just, let's say it's not even a brand project. They come fully equipped with some kind of brand strategy, and it's good enough, and we can interpret that. Just start with a quick hour or two Fig Jam workshop. Get in there and ask questions about who are we talking to? What are your goals for the site? What do you think your audience's goals are? And then we're going to go ask your salespeople, and they're going to tell us something different. Go look at their current web experience if they have one. Almost everyone has one. Although we did do a project this year where they had literally never had a website. I was blown away because I hadn't happened in forever.
That's impressive.
It was really interesting.
The one company.
Yeah, I know. They had never needed one, and I was like, "Wow, that's insane." But yeah, I know, right? Well, they're endowed by some Indian billionaire. So, anyways, they didn't really need to advertise. Yeah. But do all of that kind of just a couple of hours of digging into the problem, and it's not about solutions at that point. You just want your writer in that room. You want a designer in there. Even, sometimes the developer will join those just to kind of get set up on the project. Second one is to invite the writer to the table on day one, invite the content designer to the table on day one, and don't expect that they're going to roll off until after QA. You want them there pretty much the whole time. Use them as the glue. They're going to be your audience advocate. Arm them with the best audience insight and research your time and budget and creativity can buy. And again, it doesn't have to be much. Just enough, a few really good questions is better than 12 months of, dicking around talking to 50 people. And create an everybody in the pool collaborative structure. As I said before, that culture where everybody is willing to be open and share, and where you have designers that are willing to let you be in their Figma file without freaking out, things like that. So you have to kind of build that a little bit. And just generally remind yourself, what would this audience need, right? There are 1,000 minutes between kickoff and launch, and everybody is going to have their own opinion, especially the client's CEO and the marketing manager's wife for some reason wants something, and you just have to keep reminding yourself and then reminding them that look, we asked the questions and this is what we heard, and so we need to try to honor that. There's lots of flexibility, but we need to listen to what your audience is saying that they want.
Yep. Yeah, I think too with if they're larger projects, and even smaller ones can be, unless you have that mega deadline like you mentioned, it's everyone knows it's a sprint, right? So there are trade-offs that everyone already immediately understands. But even if it's a few months, which is a really short timeline, at least historically, to completely do a whole website, especially with brand involved, it can be hard for them to remember what was said.
And what's important, right?
And hard for us to remember as the ones staring at those files all day that they're not doing that. This is they came to some meetings and they're also doing their other job and all that kind of stuff. So that always stands out to me as I'm always reminding myself okay, they haven't seen that file with all the questionnaire stuff.
All the stuff,
in a month. So it's our job to bring them in. So I love that one. You talked about key tools, and obviously this is a Webflow centric kind of a show and conversation, so that's one of them. And then Figma, I don't think we'd be it'd be a very spicy take to recommend Figma to the design crowd. But are there any other tools that you all have leaned in? You mentioned some that you've built, which are probably to fill some sort of gap in this process.
Sure,
so
yeah.
those are on the table as well. But any other tools that you've found like particularly helpful to getting the content-driven piece through the process?
The tools that we've built, Wes, is just basically so we can work more comfortably with enterprise entities that don't want to, they need to have a staging layer to their site. And I think Webflow is working on sort of a minor version of this. I think it's in the latest release. Matt is, the migration automation tool is great because content is what it helps with, right? So it's, you get a client that has a junk drawer of blog posts from 5-10 years back, and you need to move them all over, and they're in WordPress, and they've got a million plugins, and so we can move things over and organize them and categorize them a lot easier using a tool like that. I would say that honestly, to connect it to that, just a really good content audit spreadsheet and a really detailed researcher and writer that are willing to dig in and figure out what's here, what do we need to lift? What do we need to shift? What do we need to write new? What do we need to kill? What do we need to archive? Things like that. That is invaluable to creating a organized and useful experience in the back end, rather than just like saying, okay, we've got this like whole load of junk, we're just going to move it. We want to take the opportunity to, I don't know, Marie Kondo the heck out of it, right? So like hold it up and say, does this URL give us joy, right?
That's right.
So
one at a time, like 700.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, we use tools to do it, but the best way to do it is to have somebody run down every dang link. And obviously it's not possible if there are 9,000 of them, but we have done some very, very, very big jobs with a person running down every single link. And it's useful because then that person owns in their head what's there and then owns the story of what's next. And so they can start putting those two things together. Let's see. Research tools, we do a wide variety of stuff from just like one-on-one interviews to, we don't do very big ethnographic studies. We just haven't been asked to do that, but we can. Surveys, through Google or SurveyMonkey. And then I love this tool called Calendly. They're out of Atlanta, but I think they've got a fairly wide kind of distribution. It's mostly because like before Calendly, you had to play email tag with people to get interviews set up. And especially if you're doing like 20 of them, that is maddening. Yeah. Calendly puts the onus on that person to look at both of your schedules, choose their time. And I have found almost 90% of the time, if somebody chooses the time that they are going to talk to you, they will not ghost you. They have put the responsibility on them. So I love that.
Yeah, that's a great one because like a lot of those types of interviews too, like they don't really know, like they're not necessarily bought into what's going on.
They have no idea a lot of the time. Yeah.
So it's like, I got to talk to someone and give up my lunch hour or whatever it is. So that's a great one.
Yeah. But that's pretty much it. I mean, we aren't doing anything like super duper fancy. It's a lot of just like, asking good questions and remembering to use the answers that you get as you move forward.
Yeah, sometimes it's the boring stuff. Like you mentioned, it's just like have a good spreadsheet and use Calendly so that you don't waste 70 hours of your research time just
chasing people.
Trying to get someone who might not even be that helpful.
Exactly.
Know, right?
Or they were just the guy that you needed to talk to because he needed to be heard, but somehow he never has time to talk to you.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want to do this, but I made them make me do this.
Yeah, there's always that guy.
For sure.
So it sounds like the too long didn't read of this was you guys fuck around and you find out.
Oh gosh, constantly. Yeah.
You chose the cold open, so I'm just gonna give you the big brain, just new. You're gonna weave that.
It was perfect.
Yeah, we have a running collection of them, and I looked at them and I was like, you know what? I think Kendra will love this one. I'm just gonna this one. There's some other ones. I think there's some other ones you would have loved too, but this one was this was perfect. There's a story to it that the guy covers up the fuck around part beautifully. Seems like he definitely did it at least a couple times. Make sure he's got it covered,
the physical dance
right?
of it for me. You could. Knowing he had to cover part of it up,
So this next question connects me back a little bit to hearing your talk, and something you said that really kind of was mind blowing to me was we are moving from an age of questions to an age of answers, and I thought that was just so spot on, and you never heard of anybody kind of sum it up in that way. But this next question was kind of inspired a little bit by that, where we want to ask, like, what kind of trends do you see emerging in terms of just content design in general, as we move into this age of answers?
Yeah.
And what are you all, as back-to-back Webflow enterprise champs, preparing to stay at the forefront of all this?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one, obviously, with the rise of really good large language models and AI in general, the idea that the website as we know it, I'm not saying it's going away. I mean, I lived and worked through the Flash era. So, I mean, websites didn't go away. They just got lots better. But, that we're going to have a lot of opportunities for users to just like type whatever they want. It's going to be hyper personalized, right? So type whatever they want in there, get their answer back. The point that I was making in the Webflow Conf speech is that if that's a reality, whether that person is typing that question into a search engine like Bing or Google, or they're just going to the front door of your site and expecting you to serve up the information that's relevant to them, all the stuff that's back there that might have been 10 clicks deep before, you better have your house in order, because it's not going to be useful, it's not going to be relevant, or it's just not going to exist. So content is going to be real important in the hyper-personalized age of answers. So that's one. On the CD side of thing, I would love to see more agencies hiring content designers as a job title. You see it a lot in sort of like the big platform and product creation shops like Netflix and Google and Facebook. They all have content designers, right? App builders, things like that. But I don't know a lot of agencies or people building marketing or brand sites that have that formal content design job title or that philosophy, and I would love to see that. Right? So obviously, I think we serve a little bit of a different God, but it's definitely useful, and to have that around. I know that Content Design London is writing a new book, and that they are evolving how they perceive and achieve content design. And I would be so thrilled if it touches on the expansion of that job and philosophy to sort of wrap brand story and execution into it. But if they don't, I'm going to write that book. So we're just going to see.
Like,
I don't know.
Like a pretty big window, yeah.
Yeah. I'd like
to promote that book, you can come back onto the show.
Totally, we'll do.
We'll just append a part where like she's writing a book, like you just like have this pressure from two people, like have any horse in the race,
I got plenty of pressure from people. Let's see what else. I see the job title becoming more defined. It's still a little bit of a duplicate of UX writing, but it's so much more than that. And also the job titles in the content world are completely fucked. I mean, they are like you could go apply to two jobs that have the same job title and it'll be wildly different jobs. So also just as a person who's like been doing this for a while, I have been a copywriter, a content creator, a content strategist, a content designer, and then strategy serve another thing. But I've done exactly the same thing through all of those 4 job titles. So it's just like, it's hard people have a hard time describing or giving it like a, one moniker, right?
Yeah. It feels like there's more and more, like probably because of technology, like everyone's expected to be about like something that used to be 5 things.
Yes. That too.
At least be like adept at like 2 and then expert at 3. It's like this
1 or 2.
Like lifetime of like dedication for one of these things.
Yeah, the breadth of everything is expanding, right? So you would be hard pressed, especially in our industry, to be really successful and do just one thing, really focus. But I mean, hey, if you want to do that, then you can fuck around and find out.
Right.
Keep bringing it back.
The resume job description as like a definition for where to put your attention. It's gonna be a nightmare out there. Thinking about as a leader in the field, we think you are. That's why we wanted to have you on, and especially just in this like really driving this way of thinking. What would you say for an agency that maybe doesn't have this in-house? Like you've touched on it a little bit. Maybe it's a 5-person or less agency. If you have that kind of size agency right now, it's probably all designers and devs, or there's a brand designer person. That type. There's a mix, and it's mostly designers, especially in the Webflow world, because it allows designers to sort of bleed into dev, and we're understanding that world more and more. But, is there a way to kind of collaborate or bring that in, or, put the onus on the client more? I think of it as an education piece.
Yeah.
But, the last thing you want to do in the sales process is be like, you should really do this. Like, we can't definitely do
we
it for you.
can,
We
but
can try. So there's sort of
Yeah.
like that little part of it, I think, that maybe comes up. You kind of answered one is like, maybe we should really be thinking about, in that size agency, one of those people being, content design. You were number, 3, right? So
Yeah.
it seems like it worked out pretty well.
Yeah. I think even if it's not a permanent person on your team, having somebody with that acumen that you can pull in. We, even at 40 some, I think we're probably over 50 with the contractors that we have on board at one time or another, right? So if we need somebody who's really got a specialty in, I don't know, Lottie animations or something, we'll kind of bring them on for a while. Or if you have, that you're going to have, there's going to be certain parts of the time that or the year that you're going to need somebody's expertise in content design, just finding somebody that you can just like have in your, I just think of it having as like a bullpen of like really awesome people that we can just kind of call up and say, hey, you got time for this, being respectful of, not asking you to do it tomorrow, which is hard, I know. Yeah. But, so that's one thing. And I would say just, even if you're not a writer or a word person, and that's, everyone is to some degree, but, that isn't your main focus. Having just a little bit of this kind of thinking, it goes a long way. It's a huge start. It kind of snowballs from there. And just like taking the minute to sit down and say, okay, let's do a little bit of content discovery, and we're going to ask those 5 questions, kind of what, who, how, why, and, when, or whatever. And then that collaborative kind of open culture, where you feel able to, really get in there and work alongside people and connect with them and be able to be open with your ideas and the things that even if it's not in your lane. I think being afraid, especially a small place. I mean, if you're at a small place and you're just walking the straight and narrow of your job description and you're probably in the minority and you're just doing it wrong, because small places are the best. Yeah, right. The small places are the best place to like wear all the hats, right? I've never worked for a shop. This is the biggest shop I've ever worked for, actually. And I think we feel and run a little smaller than we are. Yeah. But every place I've ever worked before was just like, somebody might walk up to me one day and say, hey man, I know you're not a UX person, but can you make these wireframes? I'm like, sure. I guess, yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens. Yeah, so
let's fuck around and find out.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna see. So yeah, so that's what I'd say.
That's great. Yeah, I love the just like subtle tip there of like, if you are at a small place, I think this probably works for any role, is like you should be there like almost with that kind of an appetite, because everyone else is hoping for a curiosity in that leads over into their area or whatever. And
you're going to find out what you like, especially if you're younger. You're going to find out what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like. And, you're going to get all that exposure to, all those different things. Like, I am not a designer, but I will do my very best if I absolutely have to. Nobody asks me anymore. Right. But back then I would have been like, sure, why not? Photo shoot, why not? So
you probably didn't cover wireframing a lot for your short stint as an English teacher, I'm guessing.
So. No, nobody does, sadly. I think they should. But
exist.
Yeah.
The web's not a real thing anyway. So
nah. When you close the laptop, it all goes away, right? Yeah.
That's right. It's not even the real world.
So before we wrap up here, we're going to fuck around one last time and find out. And I really hope our video editor keeps a little ticker somewhere of like how many times we say this during this episode.
I'm like, they could probably do that.
Yeah. So this is a note for you, Antonio. Go ahead and throw that in there. So this is probably the 20th time we've said it. But we're going to throw a bonus question your way real quick. And
sure.
So as we've been bringing more amazing guests like you onto the show, we thought it would be kind of cool and interesting to give you all an opportunity to ask a question, because we're the ones that are constantly asking questions. So if you could ask the next guest, whomever they may be, a question, it could be whatever question you want it to be, what would that question be?
Oh my goodness.
They'll be a creative they'll be in this world, if that helps.
They'll be in this world. Okay. Well, or I could just ask a question that's like completely outside.
It's not looking good.
Oh, okay. I got maybe 2, just because why not?
Sure.
the more kind of professional question would be like, what is the hardest part about integrating content and design and brand into your process? Like, I want to hear, like, I know why it's hard for us, and I know why it's been hard, over the years, and these are problems we're trying to solve, but what's the barriers? Where are the barriers to making all of that stuff sing the same song? Is it time? Is it money? Is it expertise? Is it something else? That's one. And the second sort of non sequitur question is, and this is because on our Friday morning stand-up, someone asked this, what's your favorite regional pizza style?
All right.
Great question. There's always this point we usually record in the morning, like right about this time slot. And I'm always like, oh, I'm hungry now.
I know. It's like
that really,
20 minutes before lunch for me specifically.
That really I'm like, okay, we're transitioning to the lunch phase of the day now.
The clear answer is Detroit style. I mean, that's
holy shit, that's mine.
that's clearly the
That was my
answer.
vote.
Yeah, it's like there is a
That's
correct
easy.
answer here. And everybody.
So with that, thank you for entertaining us there. These are both great questions, and we look forward to asking them for you to our next guest, whomever they may be. And with that, we'd like to give you a chance to open up a can of shameless plug. This is where we thank you and show our gratitude by letting you plug whatever it is that you want to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously, I want to plug Edgar Allan, our digital agency. We're just at edgarallan.com, although I think thanks to our SEO guy, we also show up at edgarallan.com. We're also on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you can find all kinds of content of different types that we have all written about in video. We also have a YouTube channel, YouTube at Edgar Allan. So there's lots of stuff there. We have a Spanish language community called Webflow Cafe, which is pretty active and serving the Spanish-speaking world, which I think is really cool. And I'll also plug Webflow, of course, obviously, because the massive, amazing... Well, I know, right? Who are they? That incredible community that's building around that tool. I've never experienced anything like it. And what they're doing to sort of open the doors of digital experience creation is amazing. And I am so there for everything that they do next. And I'll just plug me. You can find me on Twitter. I tweet at letter11 and about all of this stuff. And periodically about the 3 bands that I play in. So I can plug that as well. Yeah. I'm like 1 band too many right now, to be honest with you. 2 is like my sweet spot. It's a lot of time. But and then I'm also at LinkedIn at Kendra Rainey, and I do speaking appearances, and I love to talk to big groups and small groups about brand and content design. So if anybody wants me to do that, I am happy to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, like you got us to you booked a slot on this show, so I mean, like, obviously people are.
I am going nowhere but up.
But before I do the outro, I can't let you off the hook without answering what your favorite regional pizza style is. You said the Detroit style.
Yeah.
Is there any specific pizza place in Atlanta or elsewhere that I guess we're plugging them? So
yeah, sure, that's fine. You can plug them. Somebody around the corner from my house called Corner Slice makes a really legit Detroit style pizza. They probably are from Detroit, my guess is, and it is very, very good. So yeah, that's probably my favorite one in town right now.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna like follow up after we stop recording, so I'll just ask you now. So, with that, Kendra, thanks so much for your time today. You shared a ton of knowledge in an area that's sort of unfortunately tangential to our main audience. So hopefully this brings
working toward integral.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to get there. It certainly seems on that path. It's something that people are talking about more and more, and I think it makes us so much better as designers. Like we talked about at the top, it's like we should be trying to tell that story too, not just like making a good looking thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you guys. This was a great fun conversation. I really appreciate it. And
all we
y'all
can
are killing
really
it.
offer is a hopefully like pretty fun conversation.
Oh, that's great.
So.
Totally great.
So that's it for today. Thanks again, Kendra, for joining us and sharing your expertise on Flow State. Before we go, thank you all for watching this weird little show. Your support means the world to us. We're having a blast doing it. If you also enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, stay updated, find out everyone's favorite regional pizza style, and maybe a few specific restaurants out there. If nothing else, like finding good pizza places, it's worth a subscribe.
Yeah, always about food.
That's right. And we'll be back with more premium content, as always, talking design and pricing and agency ops and all that good stuff. So subscribe, and we'll be back with more soon. So until next time, stay
Make sure to fuck around and find out one last time.